Hey everyone, Daniel here and welcome back to another video. I hope all of you are having an absolutely phenomenal day out there. As always, here today, I want to sit down and take you all through both my short-term and long-term price predictions for both Voyager digital stock and the VGX token, both of which are pretty major holdings within my stock market portfolio and cryptocurrency portfolio. But in this video, I want to take you guys through my updated long-term price targets and share some updates pertaining to, how they fit within my portfolio and my plans for them moving forward. So if you end up enjoying this video whatsoever, please consider subscribing and let's get into it. So right before we do get started though, I just want to say, none of what I say in this video is financial advice. It's all opinion and all just educated guesses on where Voyager Digital may be in the future based on potential improvements in fundamentals. So with that out of the way, let's focus in on my 2021 targets on Voyager Digital stock, trading under ticker symbol VYGVF on the OTC exchange and ticker symbol VYGR.CN on the Canadian Securities Exchange for any Canadians out there. So when we look at my 2021 targets, the first thing we need to focus in on is the current valuation of Voyager. It just closed at $17.18 as of Friday evening. Multiply that by the fully diluted share count of 172 million shares. That takes into account all warrants and stock that is yet to be diluted. And in my opinion, Voyager won't need to dilute any more stock given their cash position and the fact that their business is generating a lot of money. So 172 million shares, I think that's going to stay relatively stagnant, if not actually go down in the coming years due to their stock buyback. But, multiplying those two numbers together, we get a fully diluted market cap of right around $2.95 billion at this moment in time. And that's going to be the benchmark that we use for all of my both my short-term and long-term predictions, which we'll take a look at in a moment. So the next thing we need to take a look at is revenue. This is going to be kind of the main thing that we use when valuing Voyager in 2021 and obviously 2023, 2024-ish. The VGX token is a little bit different, but now looking at 2021 so far, we only have three revenue numbers that are set in stone: January, February, and March, where Voyager reported 8.5, 20, and $31.4 million in revenue respectively. Obviously phenomenal growth month over month. And throughout the month of April, we saw an increase in trading volume within altcoins, which Voyager makes much more money on, and filling in the blanks with some of the data that they gave us with assets under management and potentially principal value traded, we can assume right around $60 million or $61 million in revenue throughout the month of April. That isn't confirmed, but based off of the numbers that we have, I'm highly confident that that will be correct. And, moving forwards after that, it does get a little bit more blurry as Voyager has not given us any more data besides that. So, focusing on May, June, July, August, all the way to December, this is all pretty much a guess, but we're going to try and make an educated guess. Looking at growth that we've seen all the way from January to April, what we've seen this year, the slowest period of growth was February to March, where we saw over 50% revenue growth month over month. There aren't really that many signs that revenue will slow down further, or revenue growth will slow down further in the back half of the year, but I'm going to assume a 15% compounded monthly growth rate, which again is significantly less than what we've been seeing over the past few months now, but we do have to assume that as the law of large numbers takes place, growing percentage-wise at, a 50% level month over month won't be sustainable. And, besides that, I think 15% is very realistic given their, continued expansion of the Voyager platform throughout the United States, potentially international expansion throughout the summer and the back half of the year. And on top of that, releasing new products such as debit cards, payment processing, stock trading, I think that's very, very likely and, very well could be and could very well end up being conservative if Voyager does execute on a high level. Now, if we do see a bear market in cryptocurrencies throughout 2021, which I think is pretty unlikely, this will be obviously optimistic, but if cryptocurrencies just stay stagnant or potentially drift up throughout the remainder of the year, I think this is very, very likely. And this gives us a situation where we get right around $1 billion in total revenue for full year 2021, obviously assuming that 15% growth rate month over month for the remainder of the year. Now, using $1 billion in revenue, we next have to kind of add on to this by adding a valuation. This is one of the most difficult things that we can do when analyzing any company, especially Voyager. Find out exactly what price to sales ratio or price to earnings ratio Voyager should be trading at. And, the reason it's so difficult is because a lot of it is based off of one main thing: perception. What is Wall Street's perception of Voyager Digital and the cryptocurrency industry? Now, currently, Wall Street is a little bit skeptical of cryptocurrency companies, and that is included with Voyager, which is why they trade at such a ridiculously cheap valuation. I did kind of skim over this, but using this $1 billion in revenue and their current market cap, they're trading at a price to sales ratio of 2.7, obviously assuming that growth, but that's ridiculously cheap. This is a company that just reported 50% operating income margins, is growing revenue significantly, has a great balance sheet, great management team, a great product, and is only going to continue expanding throughout the remainder of the year. So given that, I think a 10 price to sales ratio, which is what I have here, is almost on the conservative side, given that at a 50% operating income margin, which is what they just reported off of obviously January, February, and March revenue, you get a potential net income margin of close to 35, maybe 40% on the high end. Obviously, that is debatable with taxes and whatnot, but that's kind of what you can expect from that high of an operating income margin. And, moving forwards, there is a good chance that that actually expands to potentially 55, 60% in the back half of the year, as a lot of their costs are fixed as a company. Now, assuming a 35-40% profit margin, net income margin rather, at Voyager, and a price to sales ratio of 10, that translates to a price to earnings ratio of just under 30, which is ridiculously cheap given the growth that this business is yet to experience, which again, we'll take a look at more in our 2024 models. But taking a look at Voyager currently, I think a 10 price to sales ratio could very well be conservative. I think 15, 20, very well possibilities. But again, I want to go a little more conservative in this case. And again, using just a 10 price to sales ratio, that gives us almost an $11 billion market cap and a price target of right around $63 by the end of 2021. Now, again, assuming potentially this price to sales ratio actually increases to maybe 15, which again is on the high end, we get a price target of closer to $100. So looking at Voyager, I think a lot of this is up to perception. How is Wall Street going to perceive a company like Voyager, and are they going to give Voyager a fair shot when it comes to valuation? In my opinion, the chances of $100 per share by the end of the year are possible if Wall Street ends up looking at 2022 in an optimistic tone and really changes the way they look at the cryptocurrency industry as a whole. In my opinion, $65 is much more realistic and could very, very well happen by the end of the year. Now, keep in mind, although the fair value of Voyager may be significantly higher than it is here today, that doesn't mean the stock price will follow, although it very well could. It really is up to Wall Street to come up with, where the stock will be trading at and the sentiment around companies like Voyager by the end of the year. So now that we took a look at my 2021 targets, let's look out a little bit further, potentially to 2024, to see the potential opportunity that Voyager provides. And again, same valuation, just under a $3 billion market cap, but the way we kind of take a look at revenue is a little bit different than what we just looked at, because when we look at total funded accounts at Voyager, these continue to grow month over month over month and are currently almost at 600,000 total funded accounts at Voyager Digital, obviously significantly higher than where we were at just 1 year ago. And assuming that Voyager kind of continues that pathway of growth when it comes to total funded accounts in the back half of this year and over the longer run, I personally see a scenario where they reach 5 million total funded accounts potentially by the end of 2023, maybe early 2024. Now, the next metric that we have to touch on, obviously total funded accounts is one, but the next one is how much money Voyager makes on average per month per account. Currently, this number stands at well over $100. A lot of people are purchasing altcoins, and elevated volumes of trading are causing this number to be, in my opinion, a little bit inflated in the short term. I think over the next couple of years, we will see this number decline. To what level? That remains to be seen. I think $50 per month per account, although that is significantly lower than it is here today, we do have to keep in mind Coinbase is at maybe $30, $35. So this may very well be conservative. I want to play around with this number in a moment here. But at $50, I think that price is in a conservative scenario and, kind of gives me confidence moving forwards that even if, monthly revenue per account declines substantially, there's still significant upside in terms of the stock. Now, that translates to yearly money per account or yearly revenue per account of around $600. Multiply those two numbers and you get total revenue of around $3 billion potentially over the next 3, maybe 4 years here. Now, talking about Voyager's EBITDA margins, they just reported a quarter with $60 million in revenue, and alongside that, they just had operating income margins, or essentially EBITDA margins, of right around 50%. I think as the business scales, these margins will increase substantially, potentially to 60%, leaving a scenario where, in my opinion, Voyager could very well have a net income margin of right around 45%. And 45% of $3 billion leaves us with potentially $1.35 billion in net income by the end of 2023, 2024. Again, this is all potentially. And using a price to earnings ratio of potentially 30, which again, that's very subjective, but multiplying the net income by the price to earnings ratio, we get a long-term market cap target of around $40 billion, or a long-term price target of well over $200 per share. And you see the different kind of percentages here right below that. But in my opinion, looking at Voyager over the longer run, even assuming the significant drop in monthly revenue per account, we still get a scenario where they report significant revenues, significant profits, and thus a significant increase in the fair value of their stock. Now, there are obviously a lot of moving parts here. In my opinion, this number won't decrease below $50 unless we do enter a period of a bear market, which would obviously decrease trading activity on the platform significantly. I do have a video focusing in on the bear case scenario, obviously going through the bear market scenario, which I will leave in the description down below. In my opinion, as long as cryptos are in a bear market 3-4 years down the road, $60, $70, $80 per month per account could very well be possible. And obviously, the more this increases, the more total revenue increases as a whole. And you also have to consider the fact that, as Voyager grows, they're going to expand their product lineup with, payment processing and debit cards, credit cards, margin trading, stock trading, etc. So, as new products are released, the potential revenue per account will increase alongside that, which makes me very optimistic about it. Again, the price to earnings ratio, 30, I think that's the mid case, which is what I'm going to use in this model. And either way, you get significant upside with the stock. So, looking at Voyager Digital stock, which we'll focus in on the token in a moment here, but, I have right around 33% of my portfolio in Voyager Digital stock. It has been decreasing as a percentage of my portfolio for the past couple of weeks and past couple of months, mainly because the share price has been staying stagnant while a lot of my other stocks have actually been increasing. So, looking at this share price right now, looking at the current valuation and looking at the potential upside that it provides as a stock, I could very, very well see myself adding to my Voyager position potentially over the coming weeks, as long as it doesn't move in a major way. I'm very confident in Voyager Digital stock. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Now, the next thing that I want to cover here is the VGX token, and if you don't know what this is, it's essentially Voyager Digital Native Rewards Token. Voyager is set to release their Voyager loyalty program, which is pretty much based off of VGX token ownership. The more VGX you own, the more potential rewards you get, such as cash back on your trades, more interest on your holdings, and other things along those lines. And, once this does go live, potentially in the back half of the summer, early September, the use case for VGX will really be unleashed. And, assuming that, we should see a bump in the VGX token price. But let me make this very clear. The VGX token is a bet on the Voyager loyalty program, which is also a bet on Voyager Digital and the success of the platform. Now, I've mentioned this model in the past, and I'm going to mention it again. Pat Ackerman, he's one of the early day investors in Voyager Digital stock and the VGX token. And a couple of months ago, he released this model that takes into account total funded accounts, percentage participation in the loyalty program, and other things along those lines, including Metcalfe's law, which is what Bitcoin has been following over the past decade to come up with different scenarios. And in his mind, once we reach 1 million total funded accounts at Voyager, we should get a scenario where the VGX token price is in and around $50 to maybe $60 per token. Now, when we look at this model, although I do think it is correct, one of the main things that we do need to take into account is as the token price increases, the eligibility requirements for all the different tiers will decrease, and that will happen. The CEO of Voyager, Steve Ehrlich, he has mentioned this in the past, and that's very important to keep in mind. For example, what may be right now a 500 token eligibility spot may decrease to 200 to 300 tokens if the token price does end up doubling or tripling over the coming months. So as that does happen, the argument is that less people will be incentivized to hold as many tokens. And the one rebuttal that I do have for this is the fact that, let's say the price of VGX increases substantially, and because of that, the eligibility requirements of the Voyager loyalty program potentially need to decrease alongside that. Let me put this into context. Let's say that happens and, the first tier gets bumped down from 500 to maybe 300. The second tier goes from 2,500 to maybe 1,500. And the top tier maybe goes from, I think it's 20,000, which is nuts, to maybe closer to 10,000, right? Let's say that does end up happening. Are people going to sell their excess VGX to potentially go buy other tokens? Or are they maybe going to say, oh, you know what? The eligibility requirement of the tier above me just dropped significantly, so now it's actually much easier for me to go ahead and gain that next tier on the Voyager loyalty program. And if that does end up happening and the mentality of people isn't, oh, I want to sell, but you know what? I might buy a little more because the next tier is actually much more achievable for me now. I think we may get a situation where the effects of a price, or rather an eligibility decrease, actually impacts the token in a neutral way, which would be honestly a best case scenario. Now, as of the end of May, Voyager was sitting at in and around 570,000 total funded accounts on the platform. And since the beginning of the year, we have seen exponential growth in new funded accounts on the platform. Now, if we continue to see this exponential growth, that remains to be seen. But what I've kind of plugged into this model is this 170,000 new funded account bump that we saw from the end of April to the end of May. I've kind of just repeated that over the past year here to a point where we get potentially around 1.76 million total funded accounts by the end of the year. So what we can do here next is take this figure of 1.8 to 1.9 million total funded accounts and plug it into Pat Ackerman's model. But before we do that, I want to price in this scenario. Obviously, we just talked about potential eligibility requirements decreasing as the price of VGX increases. But, assuming that the eligibility requirements maybe decline by right around 50%, we can still assume that at around 1.8, 1.9 million total funded accounts, we get a situation where the price of VGX is still trading around $45 per token, which is significantly higher than it is here today. Does that happen? It remains to be seen. So as long as the Voyager loyalty program is successful and as long as people participate in it, I do see a pathway of fair value for VGX going up to $35, $40, $45 per token. Obviously, will it go up to those levels? It very well could. I'm not going to say it will, but that's kind of the fair value of VGX, and that's what makes it so interesting. Obviously, a lot of cryptocurrencies, it's very difficult to predict potential price targets for them based on the fact that, they're not based off of actual businesses. Sure, they're cryptocurrencies that may experience surges in, maybe smart contract usage or transactions. But talking about VGX, the fact that it's tied to the growth of Voyager and the Voyager platform makes it a very attractive a risk-reward proposition and just another way to bet on Voyager Digital. Now, talking about my long-term price targets on VGX, it gets a little bit more blurry. Just as we mentioned previously, total funded accounts at Voyager will continue to increase over the coming years and over the coming decades. Now, alongside that, you're going to have evolution of the Voyager loyalty program, potentially more tiers, expanding into new rewards, potentially, tying in the debit card and stock trading and margin and payment processing. There are so many different directions that Voyager can take with the loyalty program to continue expanding it and continue increasing the use case and continuing to incentivize new users of the Voyager platform to continue accumulating VGX. Now, talking about my long-term price targets, I don't have a target looking out 3, 4, 5 years down the road based off of the fact that we just don't have enough data. Once the Voyager loyalty program does go live, we're going to get a better sense of how many people actually want to participate in this and the plans for it moving forward. So once that does happen, that will give more clarity. But, VGX, it's just a bet on Voyager Digital. As long as Voyager does well as a business, VGX will continue to do well alongside that. Now, for me personally, I'm almost at a point where my holdings in the VGX token are equivalent to around 10% that of my Voyager Digital stock position. I continue to accumulate on a regular basis and would not be surprised if this continues to grow to potentially 15, 20, 25% as long as VGX continues to stay at these significantly undervalued valuations. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you found some value in it at all, please consider subscribing, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.